Hi, welcome to the New Voting Project. My name is your host, and today we're here with Zak Malamud, who's the co-founder of Student Voice, an organization dedicated to help students acquire education justice. You're also the founder of the Next 50, which is helping fuel democratic leadership across the United States through various fundraising causes. I'm sure we're going to talk about that today. But thank you so much, Zak. I understand you're very, very busy in this season. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
No, thank you for having me and for the work you're doing. It's a privilege to be here.
Oh, I think it's a privilege to have this conversation. So yeah, let's get started. Just with a quick question, talk a little bit about your background, your education. It's my understanding you went to UMD, so you can talk about that a little bit and how college kind of prepared you for this trajectory of politics and somewhat campaigning and just helping fuel social justice causes.
Yeah, sure, no, of course. So I grew up on Long Island in New York, I got to be honest with you. I went to one of the best public high schools in the country, and I was not satisfied with it. And it got to a place where I had to imagine, like, if I wasn't satisfied, or if I didn't feel like I was being fulfilled, or my needs were being served in one of the best public high schools in the country, well, how is everyone else faring in schools that perhaps are not perceived to be or ranked as one of the best in the country? And that's when I started to recognize the privilege I had. Like, despite my frustrations and the challenges, I started to acknowledge that I started to connect with peers and friends across the country and understand the educational circumstances they were in and how fortunate I was. But then I also realized that, hey, who are the greatest experts on the experience that students are having in the education students themselves. That's what led me to start Student Voice, an organization to help students advocate for equity in education. It actually started by building a community online. I met a bunch of folks from Fargo, North Dakota to Ferguson, Missouri. And that's, I think, the opportunity that we were in probably back in 2012 was like online community was just really being built in a way that allowed for folks to connect from different backgrounds across the country. That's what built empathy in my life. It's what fueled my desire to help service others and uplift voices of others who don't have the opportunity to have a voice. And it's actually, going to my time at UMD, what I spent my 4 years on, and built Student Voice into a national education organization. And I chose to also use my own student voice, so to speak, to craft my own educational experience at Maryland, where I got to create my own major in civic engagement.
You created your own.
I created my own major in civic engagement and media.
That's pretty impressive, no?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's something you have to work for, but it also meant I got to curate my own educational experience, right? And in curating my own experience, I got to spend more time on Student Voice, but I also got to explore the political interests that I had that you now see me pursuing with the Next 50. I wrote my university capstone on why I thought new media would make populism the political establishment, really predicting that Donald Trump would become president, and acknowledging the fact that it's young people who really do fuel movements across the world, movements for change. And I felt like if Donald Trump was going to be elected president, we needed to start investing in our young leaders here in this country, who could work to combat a lot of the hateful ideology that he preached.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, that's absolutely the fact that you were able to just, like you said, create your own educational pathway, and
Yeah.
then through that, just have the ability, the outlet of just working on a cause that actually makes a lot of sense. Because, just to be clear, I'm a student and I'm wanting to pursue those leadership avenues, and I can tell you from personal experience, it's difficult to even get in the room, much less get a seat at the table.
Yeah, that's where the privilege comes from, right? Is like I always say one of the greatest privileges I had was growing up in and around New York, well, around New York City, because the access that I had to people, was greater than I probably would have had elsewhere. But what's different now is that you don't need to meet. I mean, look, we're living in a Zoom world. You and I had never even met in person, and so what we do, we have greater connectivity than ever before. And yes, I got to create my own major, and build my own educational experience around that. But what I'll say to anybody listening to this who's a student who's like trying to build their own pathway is that part of allowing for me to be successful both with my major, but also my professional pursuits has been relentless focus. in the work that I do, it's not like I have 50 side projects. This is my thing. Student voice was my thing. I didn't get an internship during college, which is maybe not an advisable move to everybody, but I felt like we had momentum to build off of, and I did that. Um, and with the next 50, it's been relentless focus on this work that makes it. At times, honestly, hard to have a social life. Trust me, I have my social life here and there, but um, focus on building something new from the ground up, um, and a determination to get through the challenges of building something like that. It isn't easy. I don't want anyone to think this work is easy, man. I've had some tough and demoralizing days, but I believe in the work, and I've seen the results of it. And now part of my job is to share the story of it so that others believe in it, buy into it, and help scale that vision. So that it's not Zach's organization, but rather an organization that's built by and fueling the next generation of political leaders in the United States.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you're doing right now with the next.
Yeah.
When you described it to me, I thought it was pretty innovative, and I still think it is. So the stage is yours.
Yeah. Well, 50 years ago, conservatives came up with a plan to win. And by all measures, they've won. And they've won by investing in their young people. Leading up to the election of President Trump, former President Trump, conservatives spent 3 times as much, or 500 million more, in their young people. And and any election that Trump has not been on the ballot, they've actually received a steady increase in the share of young people turning out to support Republicans. We actually saw that in the 2021 gubernatorial race in New Jersey and Virginia, where the share of young voters for Republicans increased drastically, if not made a difference in Virginia, and closed the gap in New Jersey. These are states that have been blue or have been trending blue, and yet young people are not the voting bloc to be taken for granted. But also, I want to acknowledge the fact that over 50% of those in Congress under the age of 50 are Republicans. And so we have this notion that, oh, young people means Democrat, or young people means liberal or progressive, or whatever it is. But in terms of representation in our leadership positions, actually young people tends to mean Republican, because Republicans don't take their young leaders for granted. They invest in them. They make sure they have the resources to run and win, no matter the background that they come from. And on the left, or on the Democratic side, we don't have that same infrastructure in place supporting our young leaders when they choose to step up and, well, let's say in our instance, run for office. So at the next 50, we're focused on building a more representative democracy by investing in the next generation of political leadership, but also cultivating the next generation of political donors, because we think that young people have a responsibility to build that habit of investing in our politics. Only about 2% of U.S. philanthropy in 2016 went towards political giving. Yet our government controls over $8.5 trillion in budget that can go towards solving hunger and homelessness and improving our healthcare access, et cetera. And so all the money, 98% of philanthropy that goes towards charitable causes, this is not a dig on charitable causes. Rather, it is to say that there's a significant yield on your investment in politics if you invest your money effectively in leaders that can actually move the needle, build and sustain majorities that represent your values.
Right. And so have you had any, at least now you're looking at the 2022 primaries, then you're looking at the general. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the campaigns or candidates that you
Sure.
in or are growing interest in?
Well, I'll tell you, last year we raised over $4.7 million from over 17,000 donors as an organization in partnership with many others across the country. And a good chunk of that went toward investing in young leaders. Right now, we've announced that we have endorsed 12 folks running for everything from state legislature to the U.S. Senate. And so we're really excited about in this group of candidates that we've announced, and we're about to announce another batch shortly, is that they don't come from your traditional backgrounds. You have 2 daughters of refugees. You have a son of union workers, and who comes from one of the poorest zip codes in the country and the most incarcerated. And you've got a woman running to become the first person to represent her state in Washington. We're talking about the last state in the country, Vermont, that has never elected a woman to Washington. Mississippi was the second to last. Every other state in the country has elected a woman to Washington. We're talking about somebody who's working to make history as the first Black person to represent Arizona in Washington and become the second youngest Black person ever elected to Washington, period. And we're talking about somebody who's the first Latino ever elected to the state legislature in North Carolina. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But we're not just backing people because they are the first or because they're representative. That all matters. That's all part of the calculus. But they're also running in some of the most consequential and competitive districts and states in the entire country. And so when we ask you to spend your dollar on politics, we don't want to just have you spend money on someone who inspires you and moves you. Yes, we want that. But we also want you to spend your dollar on places that will move the needle and building power that will allow us to realize the change on the issues that we care most about, like climate, like gun safety, like healthcare, et cetera. Making sure we all have decent paying jobs and a dignity of work. That comes by electing the right people to office, but also it comes when we invest in the right places. And so what we really try to do is bring those two together to build the pipeline of leadership in the places that will be the most transformative in a positive way, of course, for American lives and this next generation of Americans too, of course.
I'm sold. I mean, I don't really know what else to say as to that's. I mean, if I could curse on this channel, I would. But no, that sounds great. That actually sounds really great. The fact, and it's not even when we first spoke, it was more we're focusing on communities where a lot is at stake.
Yeah.
It's extremely, you use the right word, it's extremely consequential in the sense that we're not going to, democratic states with super majorities. We're going to rural communities. We're going to places where representation has not been effective and should be. And we're investing in young people to uplift those communities. And that's really the crux of the argument to me, which is that is what we should have been doing for many decades, and we haven't. And so we're behind. This is the hare and the turtle, but we're behind, and we need to catch up. And I think what you're doing is one of the best ways to counteract that. In addition to fueling more civic engagement, and just young people, just also the point of this channel, which is young people need to vote, and young people need to have access to voting, and start that habitual cycle.
I think one of the greatest lessons that we could all learn from how conservatives have built power over the last 50 years is that political power is not built overnight.
Yeah.
And so, I think our politics of late, and maybe perhaps our media environment too, has provoked a lot of us to be reactionary or impulsive in how we take political action, civic action. And yeah, there are a lot of short-term consequences, and it comes with a lot of privilege to say that we need to build power over many years, because there's a lot of people struggling right now, who have needs right now that many of those needs are life or death for their families. And they're about building foundations for their communities, and that's part of why we invest in districts now that can help us build power now, right? That's super important. And at the same time, as young people, Jeff Bezos has this quote that I often paraphrase, and it goes something like, the greatest competitive advantage that Amazon had was the long time horizon that they were working on. And politically speaking, as young people, the greatest advantage that we have is the long time horizon that we can work on to solve some of society's greatest challenges. And in order to achieve that, again, political power is not built overnight. Big things don't happen unless we have big majorities. And big majorities take time to develop. And so that's what the Next 50 is investing in, is investing in the long-term trajectory of individual leaders, investing in places where we can build majorities, build sustainable majorities, and build large majorities that allow us to get big things done. And so, yes, there's a lot that needs to get done right now. Lives are on the line. And so we're focused on that, but we're also focused, relentlessly focused on how do we build long-term power such that, we benefit to the greatest extent the lives of your everyday Americans.
Yeah. No, I'm sold. Y'all hiring?
Oh, we're trying to raise the money to hire more. That's for sure.
That's true. Now I want to shift. You've kind of mentioned this a couple times in the sense that, for me, when I got started in politics was the post-Trump election, right? Kind of woke a lot of people up, woke my generation up in some ways. I want to talk about, I guess, the most recent presidential election in 2020, and just what your reaction was to that, and what solutions, I guess, Now we're looking at voting rights issues. Congress refuses to act on the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Advancement Act.
Yeah.
We have these pivotal key pieces of legislation, and this idea that the United States has struggled to really guarantee civil rights for the last 200 years.
Mhm.
And now we're seeing this kind of hyper polarization occur in our political sphere. And as somebody who's kind of focused on devoting assets, devoting resources to counteract it, what is your reaction when you see things like the 2020 election playoff, and then of course your predictions for the 2022 primaries in general?
So tying this back to my story, I was really moved to become civically engaged because I grew up outside of New York City on 9/11. I remember the ashes coming over my town the next day. I remember hearing about how my father had to walk home from the city and got picked up by a Tropicana truck and driven home because that was the only way. But what I also remember are the people who the next day and the weeks after went to Ground Zero to clean up the ashes, clean up the rubble, um, and, uh, and volunteered to help those who lost loved ones or were injured in that on the tragic day. Um, and so for a long while, my politics became governed by fear that that moment would happen again. But really, what I've come to learn and what I really have taken away from that day now is that what moved me that day wasn't the fear that it would happen again. What moved me that day was the idea that people stepped up to do something to help their peers, help their community recover. And uh, I came to realize that I didn't want my politics governed by fear anymore. I want my politics to be governed by hope. And when I saw Donald Trump running for office in 2016 and then win in 2016, and then I saw children detained at the border and separated from their families, I recognized that my politics were creeping into being governed by fear again, and I wanted to find an avenue for hope. And that hope came by investing in building a community of people who cared about fixing what I felt like was our deteriorating democracy, but also investing in the leaders who would help us get there. I always say to people that the days ahead may be dark. They may be darker than today, but there is always another side. And as a Jew who had families who died in the Holocaust, I can tell you, I know that there's always a brighter, better, greener side to dark days, and we will get there. So when I see what's happened and transpired after 2020, yeah, some of it is demoralizing because we defeated uh, Trump. We defeated Trumpism in 2020. But I always bring us back to a sense of I try to put this in historical context. When we passed the New Deal, one of the greatest, most transformative pieces of legislation in American history, Democrats had over 3/4 control of the U.S. Senate. When we passed the Great Society, we had about 2/3 control of the U.S. Senate. And when we passed Obamacare, we had about 56% control of the U.S. Senate. Right now, we are dealing with the slim majorities. And when we passed legislation to help us recover from COVID, when we passed the infrastructure bill, the Biden administration has accomplished more and done more to transform America than any presidency with as slim a majority as President Biden has right now. And so in what we've accomplished so far, I find a lot of hope that Democrats have come together despite our differences and accomplished so much for the American people, and yet we have so much more yet left to accomplish. More will be accomplished with bigger majorities. That's the reality of it. We need to be winning in places that we haven't won in a while. Back in 2000, I think 8, I believe we had U.S. senators on the Democratic side, and I could be off on a couple of these states, but in North Dakota, in South Dakota, we had senators in Arkansas, Missouri, who were Democrats. At some point, we had senators I think we had a senator in Alaska. These are states that Democrats don't even dream about trying to win these days. But that's how we built a majority that allowed us to get things done. Big transformative things done. And we need to realize that what we're getting done now is substantial progress. And the only way we're going to make more progress is by winning more. We need to win more. We need to have a message that resonates with the American people. And yes, voting rights matters. I mean, I know in Georgia, voting rights is a huge deal. But I got to tell you, every day Americans don't wake up and say, think about their right to vote. Every day Americans wake up and they say, can I put food on the table? Can I feed my family? Can I pay my rent? Can I pay my bills? Can I take care of my family's health? These are the things that matter on a daily basis to Americans. Fundamental to our democracy is the right to vote, right? And the reality is, while some of our right to vote has been rolled back, we have a greater right to vote in this country, across this country, than we had 50 years ago, greater than we had over the majority of American history. This is not to suggest that this is okay. These circumstances are okay. We have work to do to build off of the progress made before. Yes, we've taken some hits, but success comes with big majorities, and that is not what we have right now, and that is why we are suffering. Americans refuted Trump. They didn't give Democrats a blank check to write to support all the issues that we care about, and that's unfortunate, but we need to do the organizing work. We need to do the electoral work to get us to a place where we can get some of those things done, and I believe we will. It will take time. There may be darker days ahead, but I promise you, I've seen it before. I've seen it again. My family history will suggest as much. There are brighter days on the other side of the darkness, and that's what we're working for. Someone needs to build for those brighter days, because if not us, someone else will.
Yeah, that's pretty good. You should run for office.
I think that it'd be better to elect dozens of young people across the country in the districts that matter than to just elect myself to office. Perhaps the day may come, but it is definitely the greatest privilege. I tell everyone, if I had $1 billion right now, I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing, no matter how stressful it is. I would say it would be less stressful because I could fund the work, but I believe in this, and I believe in the people who are investing in it, and it gives me energy every day to wake up and do this work.
Exactly. So I think the best thing is to just be born a billionaire, and then things will work out.
But you don't need to be. I wasn't born a billionaire. I don't know that you were either, and we're here doing our part. And it's good to have to work for and earn the resources to do this work. At the same time, sometimes it's more challenging than it should be. And I'm just fortunate to be in a place where I have the folks who are helping me do this work, with a great team, to elect a great, and this next generation of leaders. It's a privilege and a good fortune to be in this position. I look forward to continuing this work for a long time to come.
No, that sounds great. No, I want to thank you for coming on the show, for giving us the insight.
Thanks for giving me the platform. Thanks for the work you're doing, being interested.
Yeah, I know, right? People, I feel like we need to create more interest in these kinds of things, and really ensure that we have those the bright future days ahead of us. But I just want to, shout out you. This is your chance to kind of plug your social media and your candidate.
Sure.
Anybody you want to say, I will link in the description. Please go visit.
Yeah. Join us at the next 50.us. You can find the next 50 US on Twitter and Instagram. And remember, 50, when we say 50, it's 50. And you can also find my personal Twitter account, ZakMal. And happy to connect otherwise through there. So thank you for providing this forum, and for the work you're doing to uplift voices like mine, and the work that we're doing.
No, absolutely. You're always welcome back on, and just keep fighting the good fight. I think I'll join you there too.
Hey, you're in it by doing this work. You're in it. We're in it together.
Absolutely. All right, Zach.
Take care.